Chapter 14. Ruatio-ri-thu-thulu. Lampwick pressed her tiny hands over her mouth in a vain attempt to stifle her laughter. The giggling fairy rocked back and forth on the little pillow that Garrett had found to serve as her new bed. Garrett wrinkled his nose and tried again to read aloud from the storybook. Thrulia doodlu wick wick foala. Fula! Lampwick shouted. Fula! Fula, Garrett repeated. She seemed pleased by his pronunciation of the phrase, though he still had no idea what he was saying. Garrett sighed and turned the book so that the fairy could look at the illustrations through the bars of her cage. Her eyes went wide with pleasure as she pointed at a section of the text and cried, What? Garrett shifted in his chair. He kept Lampwick's cage on the desk now, atop a pile of books, so that she could look out the window during the day. He propped the storybook open beside the cage and squinted at the text. Ramboluna gulugu. This can't be right, can it? He said. Gaologu, Lampwick corrected him. Yeah, that. A knock sounded at his door. Garrett, Uncle's voice called from the hallway. Come in, Garrett said. Uncle opened the door and stepped inside. He crossed the floor to stand beside the desk, smiling at Garrett's attempt to read the storybook to the fairy. He reached over to turn the book's cover so that he could read the title. Songs of the Hidden Grove, Uncle said. Do you speak fairy? Garrett asked. No, but I do speak a little Fey, which is what scholars call the language of fairies and their kin. I meant that, Garrett said. A gift from Marla? Uncle asked. Yeah, but I don't have any idea what I'm reading, and I can't pronounce the words very well, Garrett said. Let me see. Uncle picked up the storybook and perused the section that Garrett had been trying to read to Lampwick. He flipped back a few pages to the start of the story. Garrett and Lampwick looked at each other. Her tiny blue eyes blinked and then looked back to Uncle Tingen. Tingen read silently for a few moments, flipping through the book as he did, and a little smile grew at the edge of his mouth. It is the story of a rather romantic young satyr and his attempts to woo a unicorn who has attracted his attention. Huh? Garrett said. Is it funny? I imagine that it would be quite hilarious to hear it read by someone who doesn't speak your language. Oh, Garrett said. We shall have to remedy that, Uncle said as he sat the book back on the desk. Since you have taken it upon yourself to learn a new language, the least I can do is find you a bilingual dictionary. I will seek a suitable one at my next opportunity. Thanks, Garrett said, afraid that he had just inadvertently volunteered for an enormous task. In any case, what's this? Uncle said, picking up an object that had been half buried under a stack of papers on the desk. Oh, that's the dragon tooth that Warren gave me for my birthday. Uncle said, studying it. More like a claw, less a drake. Where did he find it? Catacombs, he said. Some dragon slayer's tomb. A very nice gift, Uncle Tingen mused. It's worth a good deal of money in certain circles. Oh, did you want it? Garrett asked. I don't really like looking at it. Uncle remained silent a moment, and then he placed the claw back atop the papers on Garrett's desk. He put his hand on Garrett's shoulder and squeezed gently. You can't run away from the past, Garrett, he said. Sometimes you need little pieces of the past around to remind you that you survived. Maybe, Garrett said, but I'd be perfectly happy to never see another dragon again. I wish I could make that so, Uncle said, but we don't get to choose what trials we will face. We can only choose how we will face them. I know, Garrett said. You can take comfort in the fact that most people never even meet a single dragon in the course of their lives. The odds against living to meet a second one are absurdly high. Garrett shared a laugh with his uncle, and even Lampwick buzzed her wings and chattered happily in Fey. Oh, I came to tell you that Warren and his father are stopping by in a few minutes. Oh, Garrett said. He still had no idea what he would say to Warren when he saw him again. I'll give you some time to work things out with your friend when he arrives. I would suggest leading with a sincere apology. Yes, sir, Garrett said. Bargus, good to see you again, Uncle Tingen greeted Warren's father as he stepped through the basement door. Tingen, the patchy-furred ghoul said, embracing his old friend in his massive arms. Warren followed close behind his father, carrying a large stained sack over his back, with a foul look on his face. His eyes fell when he saw Garrett standing at Tingen's side. Garrett, Uncle said, help Warren take that bag to the lab while I speak with his father. Yes, sir, Garrett said. He stepped forward, offering to take the heavy sack from Warren's shoulder, but the ghoul only snorted and pushed his way past on the way to the laboratory. Once the grown-ups were out of earshot, Garrett said, Look, Warren, I'm sorry I hit you, but you were being a real pain. Psh! Did you hit me? I didn't notice, Warren growled, dropping the bag onto a work table with a meaty thump. What's your problem anyway? Garrett asked. You were being really rude to Marla. I was being rude. What about you? I thought we were going to have fun looking around the old city. That's what we did, Garrett said. No, what we did was do whatever your little girlfriend wanted to do. That's what we did. I thought you liked her, Garrett asked. She's all right, Warren admitted. But you don't want to do the stuff I want to do when she's around. Oh, well, how about you get to pick what we do next time? Garrett asked. Warren looked like he was struggling to find something nasty to say about the suggestion. Does she have to come? He asked. Garrett thought about it for a moment. Well, I like her, and I want to invite her to go with us. Warren rumbled thoughtfully. Fine, but I get to choose where to go, and it will probably be somewhere really nasty. Good, Garrett said. Good, Warren said. Silence hung between them for a long moment before anyone spoke again. Anyway, I'm sorry I hit you on the nose, Garrett said. Yeah, Warren said. I'm sorry I messed up your smooch. I got really close, didn't I? Garrett laughed. Yeah, you were practically begging her to suck all your blood out. Hey, that's not how they do it, Garrett said. How do you know? Warren asked. They use cups, Garrett said. Really? And what happens if they don't have a cup handy? I don't know, Garrett admitted. Blood smooch. They laughed together as they headed up to join Uncle and Bargus in the parlor. Appreciate it if you could look in on the boy from time to time while I'm gone, Warren's father was saying when the boys entered the parlor. What? Warren said. I'm going with you. The elder ghoul's lips curled back into a pained expression. Sorry, boy, not this time. Why? Warren whined. I've been in battles before. Bargus shook his head. You've been near battles before. You've never been in one. So, I have to do some fighting sooner or later. Warren flexed his great paws into fists. Bargus's eyes flared. I'm not gonna roll the bones with my only son in the pie tin. I don't trust them. I don't know what they're up to, but I don't trust them. You think the priestesses are just gonna throw us at the Shadiri to kill us off? Warren asked. I don't know, Bargus said, pacing back and forth on the parlor rug. Yeah, but we're too smart, right? Warren asked. If things look bad, we'd just disappear into the swamp. You'd have to be sure that no one saw you, Bargus said. If the worm women saw you run, they'd burn out Merovin first chance they got, just to punish us. I'd like to see 'em try, Warren growled. No, you don't, boy, Bargus shouted. He shook his head and his voice softened. You don't ever want to see that. Warren held his tongue and looked at the floor. I'll look after him, Bargus, Uncle Tingen said. I'll need his help more than ever with you gone. Thanks, Bargus sighed. I hate to leave him with you in this state, but he'll do his job once he stops feeling sorry for himself. Warren grumbled quietly, and his father walked over to clap him on the back. Don't worry, boy, Bargus said. Sooner or later, the Reds will come knocking at our front door. Now that's a fight you're gonna want to see.
Maleatis and Maravant meeting again, Uncle chuckled. That didn't go so well for Maravant the last time.
Heh, Mal didn't have such a good day either,
Vargas laughed.
What do you mean? Garrett asked. Uncle looked at him and smiled.
The short version of the story is that one day Maleatis, the god of blood, decided to rid the world of Maravant, the goddess of death. They and their armies met on a field, probably somewhere in Glore, and proceeded to butcher one another with great enthusiasm. Eventually, they had worked their way through most of their followers, and the two elder gods met face to face, or face to tentacle. Some of the early depictions of the death goddess are a bit impressionistic. In any case, they met and fought. Some texts claim the battle went on for days, but however long it took, eventually Maleatis was able to tear the living heart, or some similarly useful organ, from the body of Maravant, and she died, as much as an elder goddess can ever truly die. The blood god, however, was having trouble holding in what little blood he had left, so he didn't have much time to celebrate his victory. He shouted some suitably prophetic things to his surviving priests, and then fled into the northern mountains, never to be seen again. Thus the age of the war gods ended, and humans were left to continue their noble work.
So Maleatis is dead too then? Garrett asked.
Like I said, creatures like that don't ever really die, but their bodies are made of flesh, and flesh can be destroyed, even if the spirit lingers on in some form or another.
Good thing they hated each other more than they hated us,
Vargas said. Uncle said. I think creatures like that need us. They need someone to tell them they are gods. Perhaps the two of them were like jealous suitors fighting for the love of mankind.
Vargas laughed.
Well, we better be going. We got a lot of travel tarts to bake for the trip.
Wait a moment. I haven't paid you yet, Uncle said.
No need, Tinjin,
Vargas said.
We can settle up when I get back.
No, I have a special ingredient for your pies, Uncle said.
He walked to a nearby cabinet and opened it. From it he pulled a large earthenware crock with a heavy lid. He handed it to Vargas with a slight bow of his head.
For services rendered.
Vargas took the crock and lifted the lid. He gave the heavy pot a little slosh and grinned. He sniffed and shifted the crock under one of his shaggy arms, dipping a long-nailed finger into the opening. He drew back the finger, dripping with honey, and licked it. The ghoul's eyes fluttered with delight, and he let out a long sigh.
Lethean wanderer, pickled in honey. Tinjin, this is too much.
You've earned it, old friend, Uncle said.
Thanks,
Vargas said, and then turned to Warren.
Well, son, this should sweeten your disposition a bit.
Garrett looked at his friend. Warren was leaning forward slightly and salivating. His nostrils flared as he breathed in the scent of the strange treat that Uncle had given him.
Good luck with whatever you're doing with those arms, Vargas said. Warren will be back by in the next couple of days. He's yours until I get back, so be sure to work him hard.
I will, Uncle said.
See you later, Garrett, Warren said with a frown. See you, Warren. Garrett waved goodbye. The two ghouls loped away, letting themselves out through the basement, and Tinjin and Garrett walked back down to the workshop. Was that a brain in the jar? Garrett asked.
Yes, Uncle said. The brain of a world traveler who had experienced a great many things in his life.
Why do ghouls like brains so much? Garrett asked.
I thought you knew, Uncle said. Ghouls can taste memories.
So they know whatever the dead person was thinking before they died?
It's not that precise, Uncle said.
He stepped up to the work table and lifted the sack that Warren had left there, spilling its contents onto the table. Garrett drew back a little as a dozen human forearms in various states of decay rolled across the scarred wood.
A ghoul who eats a brain experiences the emotions that remain burned into the mind, even after death. The brain of a man who's lived a good life is the greatest delicacy to a ghoul.
That's kind of disgusting, Garrett said.
As opposed to what we do,
Uncle said, gesturing toward the pile of rotting limbs. What are we doing, Uncle? Uncle Tingen smiled.
We are interrogating the prisoners, Garrett.
Huh? Uncle reached and picked up one of the forearms, holding it up for Garrett to inspect.
What do you notice about all of these arms?
Uncle asked. Garrett looked over them for a few seconds. They all have tattoos, he said. Every one of the severed forearms had been marked with lines of Gloran text written in a language that he did not recognize.
What else?
They're all right arms.
Correct. And are all the tattoos the same?
Garrett stepped closer to the table, rolling one over with his finger to get a better look at it. Some of them are the same, but some of the lines are different. Some of them have more lines than others.
Excellent. Can you hazard a guess as to what these marks might mean?
I don't know.
Think, Garrett.
Maybe some of these men were more important than others?
Implying?
You said they were prisoners, Garrett said. So, are they Shadirians?
Well done, Uncle grinned. These are the right forearms of Shadiri legionnaires. The tattoos are liturgies of their past campaigns. Read a war priest's arm, and you know what battles he's fought.
Where did they all come from? Garrett asked. Did the ghouls kill all these soldiers? Uncle shook his head.
These were brought back from the front lines. The Sisterhood needs a fresh supply of bodies to create new skeletons for their army, so the corpses of any slain enemies are carted back to Wither to be reanimated as skeletons.
Oh, so they gave us the arms from some of the dead guys?
Not exactly, Uncle said. I had Bargus acquire these pieces from the officer in charge of processing the bodies.
Will we get in trouble for that? Uncle shrugged.
The Sisterhood might notice a slight increase in the number of one-armed skeletons this week, but as long as most of the body is there, I doubt they'll care. The priestesses value quantity more than quality in their work.
Oh, Garrett said, looking at the pile of forearms. I still don't understand why you wanted them.
I want to see where these men have been, Uncle said.
He began to walk around the table, picking up arms and reading the lines of text tattooed into their skin.
Purificator of Brynhaven, city of idolatry, Uncle read aloud.
He snorted with disgust and tossed the arm back on the table to land near Garrett.
Looks like you've earned at least a small measure of justice.
Garrett stared down at the dead man's arm. That soldier had been one of the men who had destroyed his home. That hand may have held the sword that slew his brother. A cold chill ran through him, and he pushed such dark thoughts back behind the gray wall of silent hope that his family was still alive somewhere.
Now there's something, Uncle muttered, holding a particularly badly decomposed arm up to a lamp. Wolf Slayer of Kreisland, hewer of the Caldoran Horde. This soldier fought in the northernmost reaches of the Empire.
He picked up another arm.
Ha ha, he said. This one studied with the monks of the Silver Sun.
Who are they? Garrett asked. Uncle chuckled.
Well, if you ever meet a man in grey robes wearing a Silver Sun talisman on his chest, you probably shouldn't tell him that you're a necromancer. They've sworn to cleanse our corruption from the world.
Are they Shadirians too?
They joined the Empire willingly and pay lip service to Maleatis, but their true passion is the destruction of the undead. A very dangerous bunch of fanatics. Fortunately, there aren't many of them.
Uncle dropped the arm he was holding and picked up another.
Oh, this is sad, he said.
What is? Uncle held the arm out so that Garrett could better see it.
Look at the finger, he said.
Garrett saw the man had a curling vine tattooed around his ring finger. He's the only one like that, isn't he? Uncle nodded.
This man was betrothed. He was probably a Jastan. It is their custom. This is only the first half of the tattoo. He was going to be married within a year. Well, within a year of whenever the Shadirians conscripted him and forced him to travel far from his home and kill other hopeful young men for the glory of the blood god. There's probably some poor girl huddled in a basement right now praying to her seal-headed goddess at an outlaw shrine, praying that her beloved will return.
Uncle's voice had grown cold, and he let the arm drop to the table. He paced the length of the room a few times and stared at the wall.
Uncle, what are you thinking?
Garrett asked. Uncle turned and looked at him.
I'm thinking the Shadiri have committed reserves from every corner of the Empire. I'm thinking they mean to end us.
Chapter 15. Garrett and Caleb walked up the curving, flower-lined lane between the tall brick townhouses of Queen's Garden. Max, Zara, and Cynic, as well as several other young necromancers, had taken up residence in the district, much to the consternation of many of their more respectable neighbors. Garrett nodded and bid good day to a well-dressed merchant and his wife as they passed him on the broad sidewalk. The merchant only scowled in response, while his wife stared in horror at Garrett's zombie. As they passed, Caleb stumbled and bumped against the merchant. "Keep that thing on a leash!" the merchant shouted, shoving Caleb away. He walked away, whispering angrily to his wife and wiping his hands on his waistcoat. "Sorry," Garrett called after them. Caleb made a little noise that sounded like a muffled chuckle. He was holding something in his right hand. "What's that?" Garrett asked. Caleb lifted his arms stiffly and his fingers slowly opened to reveal a small velvet pouch lying in the palm of his hand. Garrett's eyes went wide and he snatched the coin purse from Caleb's grasp. He ran after the couple, shouting, Wait, sir, wait!" The merchant wheeled to face him, red-faced and sputtering with rage. "What is it?" "You dropped this, sir," Garrett gasped, holding out the heavy sack of coins. The merchant's eyes went wide and his hand went to his pocket, finding it empty. He tried to speak, but only a sputtering noise came out. He grabbed the purse from Garrett's hand and stormed off, his wife hurrying to catch up with him. Caleb waited obediently for Garrett's return. Garrett jogged back to where the zombie stood. "Don't do that," Garrett said. Caleb gave a low groan and bowed his head. Garrett stared at him for a long moment. "You used to be a thief, didn't you?" Caleb only stared at the ground in response. "I think you do remember things," Garrett said. Caleb showed no sign that he understood at all. Garrett said. "Let's go." They continued up the lane towards Zara's house. Garrett slowed to a stop when he saw a richly engraved wooden carriage parked in front of Zara's door. Pulled by 4 black horses and painted an iridescent green, it could only belong to a priestess of the temple. 2 Templar guards in green liveries stood on either side of the front door. The men wore the white worm of Maravant inscribed on their ceremonial breastplates. The Templars watched him silently as he moved again to approach the door. "Greetings, sirs," Garrett said. "I have a message for Maximilian Zara."
"You'll have to wait," one of the men said.
"Oh, do you know how long?"
"No,"
the guardsman said. Garrett chewed his lip. He could visit Cynic's house first. The Nishite necromancer lived only a few houses down. "I'll come back later then," Garrett said. The Templars only grunted in response. Just as Garrett turned to go, Zara's front door swung open, and a smiling young woman emerged, dressed in a green silk tunic, black velvet hose, and high doe-skin boots. A platinum coronet bearing the worm-shaped symbol of Maravant held back her tightly braided, fiery red hair. Her eyes flashed emerald green and full of mirth, and she laughed a clear, honest laugh at something Max had said. The dashing young necromancer followed close behind her, grinning at his own cleverness. "Garrett," Max called out upon seeing him, "you finally get the chance to meet the High Priestess." Garrett saw the Templar's look of disapproval, but the priestess only laughed and swatted Zara with one of the gloves she held bundled in her hand. I'm only an acolyte, she said, looking to Garrett as she walked down the front steps. Are you the brilliant young necromancer that Max has been telling me about? Garrett moved his jaw, but seemed unable to form sound. The priestess projected a kind of overwhelming warmth. He understood immediately why Max found excuses to spend so much time with her. This is the one, Max said, and I see that he brought his zombie along to show you. They say it earned the highest marks for motility that the registrar had ever awarded. Really, she said, tilting her head with an impressed look on her face. Serefni, this is Garrett, the next Raman Thule, unless I misjudge him, Max said with a flourish of his hand. I'm honored to meet a future Death Lord, the priestess said, grinning as she bowed to Garrett. Garrett recovered enough of his wits to return the bow, though with far less grace. Max turned to him next. Garrett, this is Sister Serefni Prin, a rising star, most radiant of Maravan's daughters. Pleased to meet you, milady, Garrett said. Serefni smiled at him. She could tell him the sky was green and he would believe her. I'm sorry, she said. I have business at the temple and I can't stay to chat. Perhaps I will have a chance to see you again when we return from the campaign. If the Shadiri haven't boiled us all for witchery by then, Max exclaimed with mock dread. Serefni grimaced and slapped him across the arm with her gloves. Ow, he said. The first wound of the great expedition is mine. Is there to be some sort of ceremony to commemorate my heroism? A medal, perhaps? This is going to be a long campaign, she sighed, mounting the buckboard of her carriage. The two stern-faced Templars climbed up to take their positions at the reins as she settled into the back seat. Farewell, my fair generaless, Max said, waving his hand slowly overhead. I'll see you in the morning, Max, she said. Try not to be late. Have I ever failed you, milady? He asked. Serefni rolled her eyes and turned to Garrett. Congratulations on your zombie. I hope to see him perform next time. Garrett waved numbly as the carriage pulled away. He walked over to join Max on the doorstep as they watched her go. Max spoke without looking at him. Amazing, isn't she? Yeah, Garrett said. They stepped inside the townhouse to find Max's entryway a bit more brightly lit and cleaner than Garrett was accustomed to seeing it. The scent of lavender hung in the air. A pair of zombies stepped obediently forward, dressed in red robes and wearing masks of polished white wood. What happened to the spooky black robes? Garrett asked. Max shrugged. The place needed a little cheering up, he said. Max tugged off his cravat and tossed it at one of the zombie servants. The strip of cloth landed across the zombie's head. Garrett told Caleb to go stand beside Max's zombies. Caleb shuffled over as commanded and stood, tilting his head as he studied the expressionless wooden masks they wore. Garrett followed Max Zara into the sitting room where Cynic sprawled languidly in one of the many comfortably oversized chairs.
Did she slap you again on the way out?
Cynic asked, lifting his eyebrows. Max frowned. Shouldn't you be packing or something? He asked. He crossed the room to pour himself a drink from a crystal brandy decanter.
I've already packed,
Cynic said.
Hello, Garrett.
Hi, Garrett said. Have a seat, Garrett, Max said, tossing back the drink and pouring himself another. Can I get you something? Oh, no, thanks, Garrett said, taking the chair next to Cynic's.
What brings you to the love nest today, Garrett?
Cynic asked. Uncle wanted me to stop by and ask you both to dinner tonight. I think he has something he wants to talk to you about. What is it? Max asked, lowering himself into the chair facing Garrett. Well, I'm not sure what exactly, Garrett said, but I think he's afraid that the Shadiri have brought in extra troops to fight us.
What makes him think that? Cynic asked.
He had the ghouls bring him a bunch of Shadirian arms, and he read their tattoos. A bit of the cockiness drained from Max's face, and he glanced at Cynic. Cynic rubbed his chin and looked thoughtful.
If Uncle was concerned enough to do something like that, Cynic said.
Yes, Max said, running one hand through his hair as he swirled his drink with the other. I wish he was coming with us. Is Uncle really that good? Garrett asked. Cynic snorted and Zara laughed. I've seen him raise a score of undead in one night using month-old dead and half a flask of essence, Zara said. To this day, I don't know how he did that.
Uncle Tinjin is the most powerful necromancer I've ever met, Cynic said. He's the only one of us whom the sisterhood actually fears.
They're afraid of Uncle? Garrett laughed.
Cynic leaned forward. Uncle Tinjin is a good and gentle man. We are very lucky that he is. If another man possessed his power, a selfish or wicked man, we would fear that man for his evil as much as we love Uncle for his goodness.
I feel that Uncle Tingen will get involved in this little war someday, Max said, and that will be a very bad day for the Shadiri. Then why doesn't he fight now? Garrett asked.
Because it will be a very bad day for him as well, Cynic said.
What do you mean?
Cynic looked at Max. Power is a kind of drug, Garrett, Cynic said. Especially magic power. The more you use it, the better it feels, and the more excuses you will invent to justify using it again. Uncle has enough power within him that he could become a very great man, or a very bad man. I think Uncle would rather just be a good man, so he uses his power sparingly. He doesn't want the magic to define him, so he refuses to give in to the urge to wield it the way we might hope that he would.
Zara shook his head. I think he's being a little too cautious, he said. The magic only reflects what is inside us, and Uncle Tingen is the purest soul I've ever met. Aside from myself, of course, he grinned.
Humph, Cynic said. I'm sure Uncle has his reasons. I'm not about to start questioning them now.
Well, forgive me if I remain the optimist here, Max said. I'm hoping that he'll change his mind, or maybe he already has. We'll definitely be there in time for dinner tonight, Garrett. Thanks, Garrett said. I was hoping to see you both again before you left. Max smiled. You know we'd never leave without saying goodbye, he said.